Hi, Joe Cerrone. Welcome to CAD 230, Introduction to Solidworks, and our weekly Zoom classroom meeting. Tonight's agenda is to review the practice exam for the CSWA, and it's really kind of the CSWA light because we're not doing assembly drawings yet. But it's a good idea to start thinking about it because it's almost November and we'll be coming to that point very quickly. And so I found this Google link. It's actually a Bing link.
Hi everyone, in this video we are going
to some of these CSWA. It seems like everybody seems to have an Indian accent who's doing these lately, but it's because engineering is big over there. So as we look at the CSWA exam, they go through and they show you some of the information as far as to being able to take the virtual tester. And so there is a virtual tester, but we're not there yet. And so we could go to the Solidworks, my Solidworks area. And I recommend that you do start to use this resource. If you just go and Google my Solidworks, you should be able to find this, and you can get a free trial for it. You can also get access if you use the code that's in the student version of the software. They're going to ask you what your software code was, and each school has a unique one of those. So you can use that code to gain access. Let me know how it goes because this is new. They just started doing this, but essentially there are some learning paths in here. And so I went in and I went under the help area here or the search engine and typed in CSWA. And so they do have these CSWA part exams where you can kind of see how the test is laid out. And so as you go through these, they have very professionally made video lessons that'll go through all these different parts.
The part modeling portion of the CSWA exam is intended to test the user's knowledge of essential SolidWorks tools such as sketch relations and dimensions, boss extrudes, cut extrudes, using global variables, and setting the material for a part. These tools are used in the exam to create a part with multiple iterations, with each iteration becoming more complex with modifications added along the way. Each question changes the global variable values that are tied to the part, which updates the geometry and changes the mass of the part for each question. In this lesson, I'll walk through the techniques used to model the part in the sample CSWA exam, and I'll discuss the design intent behind the modifications in each question.
So they do have...
Here I have the sample part's first sketch profile, which has been fully drawn and is almost complete.
So they do have some good content in here. If I go back to the previous, there's also some other things that you might want to look into. They have an additive manufacturing exam. So there's a couple of people that are in this class that are also in the CAD 107 Introduction to 3D Printing. And the additive manufacturing is a second cert that you can get, and it's really not super difficult. If you've gone through the 107 class, you'll know the differences between fused deposit modeling, materials, and the terminology used within additive manufacturing. So what you want to start to think about is collecting these degrees, collecting these certificates so that when you go into a job interview or just for your own knowledge, that you have these documents. And so my job is to kind of lead you toward these learning paths. And one learning path is the CSWA sample exam. You can get that through my Solidworks. Here's the assembly drawing. We're going to start assemblies after the midterm. I'd like to do more with them, but when you get down to the core component for the first course, it's mostly part modeling. And then once we get into assemblies, we'll do what they call bottom-up modeling, which means that you have all the parts created and then you assemble them and you work with the motion. But we won't be doing that for the midterm. We're not going to be doing assembly modeling, not yet. Back to the main page. So we're going to take a look at some of the sample problems. The midterm practice exam is available, and I recommend you take the multiple choice exam 2 or 3 times, maybe 5. My magic number has always been 5 for taking exams. By then I will get to know all the questions and I can kind of key in on what I need to work on. They're not real difficult models, but the test is going to be a little bit more work than some of the simpler ones. And so I do have the tests that I will give you a peek at, and we can take a look at some of the problems for that. But the problems are all kind of the same. They have a part model that has dimensions on it. They'll have a location for the origin, although you don't see them in these 2 glyphs, but they'll typically show you where the part 0 is located on. And then they'll have a material spec. And the way they analyze your project, whether it's correct or not, is how close you are to the mass properties that you calculate for each material. And by doing that, they can see if you've modeled it correctly. And so part 1 will be multiple choice questions. And I was talking to one of the students in the class. It's not a bad idea to look at the questions from the end of chapter 1 and 2. They were mostly about computer interface, settings, mouse cursor commands, but you might see 1 or 2 of those. And then hands-on part modeling, and that's the majority of what we're going to do. We're going to calculate the mass for each of the parts, and then we'll turn in those model parts. Now, the modeling component isn't proctored with honor lock because it's just too much stuff going on. I just want to be able to verify everybody's identity. And so the multiple choice exam will be honor lock enabled, which means that you'll go to the honor lock website. And you'll be able to take the exam. When you click on the exam, I should kind of backtrack a little bit. When you're in an honor lock exam, so if I go to content here, and it's going to be module 7, it's not turned on for you guys yet, but it'll tell you that you have an honor lock exam. Chrome is the best browser for it. So if you're using Edge or something different, sometimes students will have errors with that. But essentially, you just go and you agree, and then you get started. And then it's going to put you into their honor lock system where you can go through and look at how they set things up, and then you'll be able to take the exam. I don't myself take the honor lock exams. I just put them together. So if you do see some errors, let me know, because on my end, I don't always see those. So you will take that honor lock exam for the multiple choice test. And then you have the other test, the other component of the test, which will be the hands-on exam. And so the midterm exam, I'm going to have like this as a Word document. And essentially, you'll answer these questions. They're all worth a different point value. Be sure to set the correct units of measurement. This one is set up in millimeters. Be sure to apply the correct material type. And then you just go through and you model these different parts. And then once you've got those parts modeled, you'll calculate those masses out, and then you'll be able to answer that component for the questions. So that's the hands-on, and that's the multiple choice exam. If you want to do a little bit more for it, what I'd recommend you do is you look at the CSWA material that's in the textbook. And so if we go to content, and then we go to our textbook, and it's under chapter 21. So you have to load more and then go to 21. I'm going to download that. And we'll open it. So the textbook has quite a bit as far as preparatory materials for the CSWA. The exam, they give you 3 hours and they charge you about $100. I will give you a voucher for that. And you don't have to take the CSWA. It's just available for you. I'll have my own exam. Some of the students say, you know what, I don't have enough experience with SolidWorks. I want to take it in the second class. Other people I've had who've taken the course have taken the CSWA as well as the professional and even the expert exam. I had 2 people who passed the expert exams within the last couple of years. And so these are great credentials. So as you're starting to work towards it, you might be like, hey, you know, I have a pretty good idea of how this is working, but you can get these different credentials and you'll also get a certificate from Solidworks for each of the different areas. I recommend the CSWA and then the additive manufacturing. And then as you look at the test itself, it's broken up into different components. The first one is on drawing parts and assemblies. The first one is on drawings. Second part is on parts, and the last one's on assemblies. And then you have 3 hours to complete it. Ours is going to be CSWA light. We haven't really done much with drawing views. I wish the author would have gone a little bit more into it because these are the paper printouts that are generated from the part models. And so they'll go through and ask you things about crop views, section views and details, alternate position views. This would be considered a broke out section view, but we haven't covered that material yet in the textbook. The modeling part is what you want to be good at. And so this was very similar to the part model that I did, where you'll create that model. And then at the end of the modeling session, what they'll do is they'll ask you to calculate out the mass of the part. And so they'll have you assign a material spec to that and then use the analysis. So for example, if I'm looking at this part right here and I wanted to analyze it, what I would do is I would set the material spec. This one's set for nylon. If I right click on it, I can say edit material, and I can look at the material. It's taken from plastics, it's nylon. And then this is where the properties are set for that material. Once we have that material set and applied, we can then go through and analyze it. If I look at the sketches for this, this one was created from just a basic sketch, kind of looks like a letter Z for it. Make sure that you use the proper units. And then as we go through and we model this, you can kind of see the process. And so we can unabsorb these. I call it the Wayback Bar. I don't know if you remember that show with Sherman the dog, and I forget who the other fellow was, but it was like a Saturday mornings cartoon thing. They'd go on the Wayback Machine and go back in time. And so that's kind of what we do here. This is what I really like about SolidWorks. You can see the creative process, what was involved in creating that. And they're not always the best. You know, when I look at how I did them, the first time I go through these, maybe not as efficient. I'll do the part models a couple of more times and they get better. Once you've got the part modeled and the material assigned, you'll go to the Evaluate tab, and then you'll click on Mass Properties, and then you'll calculate out the mass properties. Now, it's not asking you for volume, it's asking you for mass on this. And so it's a little different than some of the ones that you may have been taking with what Sebastian wrote for our curriculum. So make sure you look at the correct mass property to evaluate. All right, and then if we look at some of the other content for that, essentially we're going to be modeling the parts. I've got a few other parts, if I open them to give you a kind of a look at them. Second part isn't super difficult. Again, it's very similar to some of the ones that we've done. Again, you're going to go through and you're going to start by modeling the part. If I were to bring this down and look at the sketch, these should be fairly easy for you nowadays. They don't check if it's fully defined, so you don't have to worry about fully defining everything. You just have to model the part correctly. And so here, you know, be sure to notice where the origin is. And then as we go through and we create these different models, everybody is just doing very well in this class. And then as we look at some of the other part models, they get harder as we go through. And so this one is not too bad. And then I have a couple other ones. And I'm not going to show you all of it, but this one I liked. It was from a previous CSWA exam, and that's what I like to do. I like to take some of the old ones. You may have to create a plane. That's what I found the best way to create this one was by creating a plane. If I look at the way back bar, how I modeled this one, I started off with a cube. And then I put the X on the back of it. Cut out my extrude cuts, more extrude cuts. And then I had to create a plane to be able to locate where to put. It's kind of got like an area for like a bushing. And so by creating the planes, I was able to then locate where that would go, or like an O-ring. That's the word I was looking for, within this part model. And then just add the necessary features and calculate out the mass property from that part based on material spec. I don't know if there's a material spec on this one. I believe there is, because I have one on here, ASI 1020, which is a type of steel. I'll leave the last one for your own imagination for you guys to go through and work on. And then the multiple choice exam, again, go to the main and then go to SolidWorks practice exam under quizzes and exam. I've only had a couple of people who've taken it. So those people I'm sure will do quite well, but the other guys here who haven't taken it, you could improve your score if you do. And I am giving you points for the part models that you turn in for the midterm exam. So make sure that you do take the midterm practice exam. Let me qualify that. And so as we look at the midterm practice exam, I do the same for the final. It's been a long day, so if I have a little trouble finding it, bear in mind, I will find it. So here's my practice test. And there's a lot of questions. There's 91 questions, 92 questions. And so as you go through it, it'll mix them up for you. You can go through and you can see how you did on the questions. There's a couple of them that are fill in the blank, which I have to grade myself. So if you go and you take it and you feel like you did really well and you're winding up with a lower score, it's because there's 2 questions worth 3 points each that haven't been graded. So I will grade those and give you the answer for that once you take the practice quiz. All right, so that's how that's going to work. Next week, we're not going to have a Zoom meeting. I'm just going to enable the exam, and then I'll be online during the class to answer any questions about the exam if you have any difficulties with that. All right, so it's not a real difficult week. I figure that you guys have been working quite hard. I have turned on the other modules, so if you do want to work ahead and just kind of get things done, there are additional modules that are open, but they're not required. Take some time this week, practice the models, practice the parts that you need to take for the midterm exam. And the questions are usually the hardest part. Most people do really well on the modeling. And then, you know, when you get down to the end of the semester, you're eligible to take that SolidWorks associate exam, and it's a very good certificate to have. All right, with that, I'm going to stop the recording, and then I'm going to open things up for questions, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the CSWA.